So I assume that you've heard that Israel is the West's greatest strategic ally in the Middle East, that it's a pillar of democracy, a stabilizing agent in the powder keg that is West Asia, that they protect our interests in an intersectional region that connects 3 continents and secures our energy, which is so crucial for our domestic and military viability. Well, we just pulled some memos from the National Archives written by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to then President Truman in October 1947, recommending strongly against the partitioning of Palestine. They're interesting historical artifacts, for they predict 77 years ago the political catastrophe that is the Israel-Hamas war. With regards to the partitioning of Palestine, quote, "The Joint Chiefs of Staff desire in the attached memorandum to apprise the Secretary of Defense with their views regarding the grave military implications of this problem and its relationship to the security of the United States." Unquote. As you know, generations of propaganda have gone into reinforcing this idea of natural allyship between the United States and Israel that resists critical thinking. Put aside for a moment the inestimable human suffering that has resulted from the construction of this undeniably colonial project, we could easily demonstrate a net strategic loss. First, the degrading of American hard power in 2 grinding, low-intensity forever wars in West and Central Asia, the decision for which was inextricably linked to the Israel lobby and special interests.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever.
Bear in mind, it is Netanyahu's long-standing political fever dream to get the United States involved in a 3rd disastrous forever war with Iran on behalf of Israel, for a nuclear Iran would put a check on Israeli impunity within the region. Second, the degradation of American soft power, i.e. the non-coercive use of culture, political values, and foreign policies to enact change. The past 9 months spent witnessing a genocide have emphasized the stunning hypocrisy of vaunted Western values and human rights, which are apparently selective based off the grounds of race, creed, and religion.
Yesterday, President Biden said that, in his opinion, war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. Personally, I agree. Intentionally targeting civilians is a war crime.
Functional democracy and representative government doesn't represent the will of the people, but rather foreign interests like that of AIPAC. By unconditionally supporting Israel in its self-destructive cleansing of the Gaza Strip, America is increasingly looking like a violent and unstable actor on the global stage. You know, who isn't? Traditional political adversaries like China, with its massive Belt and Road Initiative, and Russia, recently vindicated by its success on the Ukrainian front. Whatever you think of those governments, the shift is undeniable, and it's inextricably linked to Palestine. Memorandum for the Secretary of Defense, October 10th, 1947. Quote, "The Joint Chiefs of Staff are of the opinion that implementation of a decision to partition Palestine, if the decision were supported by the United States, would prejudice United States strategic interests in the Near and Middle East, and that United States influence in the area would be curtailed to that which could be maintained by military force. Further, there is a grave danger that such a decision would result in such serious disturbances throughout the Near and Middle East area as to dwarf any local Palestine disturbances resulting from the decision. As a consequence, the USSR might replace the United States and Great Britain in influence and power throughout the area." Unquote. The most prescient prediction here is that the partitioning of Palestine would alienate the people of the Middle East to such an extent that the US government would have to install military presence, mostly through the construction of bases throughout the region by whatever means necessary, the coercion of state governments through financial leverage, bribery, and the threat of force, for example, in order to secure the vast oil reserves of the Middle East. Since soft power and influence wouldn't work after partition, they'd have to come in with hard power. And yes, the decision would result in such serious disturbances to the region that the USSR, modernized now to Iran, Russia, China, might replace the United States and Great Britain in influence and power throughout the region. This is demonstrably coming to fruition. As to the importance of a stable Middle East, friendly to the United States and Western democracies, it is obvious that this area is the buffer between the USSR and areas of great strategic importance to the United States and potential allies. If the people of the Near and Middle East turned to the USSR, this would have the same impact on United States security and strategic interests in many respects as would conquest of this area by the USSR. The most serious of all possible consequences from the military point of view is that implementation of a decision to partition Palestine would gravely prejudice access by the United States to the oil of Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. This is probably the one large undeveloped oil reserve in the world. A great part of our military strength is based on oil. It now appears that the loss of Iraq and Saudi Arabian sources of oil would mean that in case of war, the United States would fight an oil-starved war. As a side note, Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the West's greatest ally in the region, has announced that he has accepted an invitation to Iran for the first time in 20 years, presumably in an attempt to normalize relations between the two states. So, the Joint Chiefs couldn't have predicted in detail the intricate drama that played out during the Cold War, but this historical artifact is prophetic in that it foretells, in general terms, of poor, short-sighted U.S. foreign policy, of diminishing U.S. influence on a global scale, and the compromising of American security objectives for the sake of political expediency. The partitioning of Palestine, as the Joint Chiefs referred to it, was and continues to be a strategic blunder. Even the most hardened imperialists amongst us must start to recognize this demonstrable reality. If you only care about U.S. interests and power projection, not people, then contact your representative. Not that it will accomplish anything. The decision to partition Palestine never made much sense in terms of realpolitik, and there are many ways to argue that. We just wanted to pull these documents from the National Archives so you could send it to your boomer uncle that grew up idolizing General Marshall and Admiral Nimitz, and I'm sure there will be a link for it around here somewhere. Do what you will with it. Cheers.